So, for our opening keynote, we welcome Sandeep Johri, who is the board member and former CEO of Tricentis, and person I truly reckon to be my mentor. Sandeep loves mountain climbing and hopes to pursue his passion. We welcome Kevin Thompson, who's the newly appointed CEO of Tricentis. Kevin comes from SolarWinds, where he served as president and CEO. Kevin, welcome aboard. This keynote is moderated by none other than Rich Karlgaard, who is well-known publisher of Forbes magazine. He's an entrepreneur turned writer and has written 3 books. So Rich, please take over, as we are all in our front rows and we're looking to enjoy this session.
Thank you, Minnie, and thank you, TiEcon. It's always such a pleasure and an honor to be able to participate in these TiEcon events, and a tip of the hat, as always, to my friend Vish Mishra. Sandeep, since this is the AI and ML track, why is AI suddenly bursting upon the scene? Why has it over the last couple of years? Why is it? Why will it define digital commerce and infrastructure in the 2020s? Because, you know, you could probably date AI conceptually back to Alan Turing's comments in the Turing test of 1951. Remember, Marvin Minsky really formalized AI teaching in the 1950s at MIT. There have been many false dawns of AI where AI was going to take over the world. But this time it seems real. Why is it real now?
Rich, that's a great question. You know, AI is not a new idea. Carnegie Mellon had an AI school way back, right? Almost 25 years ago. So it's been a concept in computer science for a long time. I think what's changed is as computing has become so much cheaper, storage has become cheaper, the availability of data has become cheaper. All of those factors coming together have allowed people to create these incredible AI, ML-based systems that you can then use for real problems. At Tricentis, for example, we do automated testing, and we introduced an ML-based engine called Vision AI only in December. We GA'd it only last December. In 5 months, we have had over 300,000 application interfaces it has learned from. It now has a database of 13 million application elements it can recognize. And literally in 6 months, roughly 6 months, it is now running and recognizing applications, which is something we need to do as part of our product, faster than the human eye can. So it's just incredible what computing and the learning algorithms can do. And it's not just in testing, it's in every software has to be an AI, has to have AI ML engines based into it. It's really become table stakes now.
Well, I want to get into Tricentis and what it does and who it does it for, and bring in Kevin into the conversation as well. But I give you this idea. It was one shared to me by Diane Green, when the co-founder of VMware back in the 90s, but she said this at a Forbes conference for CIOs in 2017 when she was CEO of Google Cloud. And she said, the era of Moore's Law is over. And I thought she was going to go down a track where she was going to say, you know, the doubling of transistors that we can put on a little silicon wafer, we just can't go to the moon. You know, you can't go to infinity. But rather, she said, Moore's Law is over. It's been eclipsed by a faster rate of evolution because of cloud infrastructure, basically unlimited compute power, unlimited data storage, AI, ML, and ubiquitous mobility. Comments, is she right? I haven't heard anybody refute that.
Yeah, Rich, I would say that she is right. And I think we're seeing that in almost every application area that we look at. So whether it's, you know, business applications or it's infrastructure applications, the speed at which things are being transformed into digital format, it's been it's been accelerating, not slowing down. And I actually thought it was going to start to slow in 21, but I'm actually seeing a bit of a reacceleration right now. So I think Diane's right. I've known Diane since 2006. We were both much younger then, and things were moving fast then, but much faster now.
Well, I've got you, Kevin. Let's talk a little bit about Tricentis and what persuaded you to join Tricentis. What did you see in the promise of Tricentis and the company that Sandeep had not founded, but really scaled up and built? And then I'll go to Sandeep, because the working relationship that both of you have with each other and with the co-founder Wolfgang Plotz is really, I think, the only other company I've seen work like that and works extremely well is at ServiceNow, a great example. But what persuaded you, Kevin, to join Tricentis?
So I've been really fortunate in my career to not spend time at what I'd call a normal software company. My first software company was Red Hat back when it was a brand in search of a business model. I was part of a small team of people who really came up with how do you make money from free software. Then I had the good fortune to spend a little bit of time at SaaS Institute, which is, at the time was the largest private software company in the world. And, it's a myth to most people in the world, and learned a lot of unique things there. And then almost 15 years at SolarWinds, where we pioneered a different approach in how to build technology and relate with communities and take that technology to market. So I was looking for an opportunity that had those same types of unique aspects, where we could be disruptive in a market, where we could do something different and be a leader and really create something that has the ability to be very large over time. And when I met the Tricentis team and I learned about the company and I looked at the space in the market they're in, I looked at the market position they have. We talk about the machine learning technology in the Vision AI that they just released. That really does set them apart, I believe, from anyone else in the testing space. And then the vision that Sandeep had of where does this go over time? It's much bigger than just testing. It's really providing all the tools a developer needs to make sure they're building quality product that's secure and that performs at the level the business needs in order for the business to perform. That's really what got me excited. And Sandeep has been really gracious, spent a tremendous amount of time with me, bringing me up to speed on the space. And then he built a really great team. And you're right, he really did come in and scale Tricentis from very small to today, what's a fast growing software company. It's got a tremendous opportunity.
Well, Sandeep, describe that process. When we were talking before this conference today, you said that you thought, well, here's this guy in Austria, Wolfgang Plotz, and some of his people who've created something of real potential, but that it could go global in a way perhaps that the Austrian founders didn't see. What did you see? And then how did you begin to scale globally? And how did you persuade the co-founders to go along? Because it's really a story of a great sort of series of handoffs from the co-founder to you and now to Kevin.
Yeah, so that's a fun story. It can go on for more than half an hour for sure. But the short version of it is I was very aware of the space. Testing is a huge spend. It's a $30 billion spend. When I was at HP, we acquired the leader called Mercury Interactive, which was a public company at the time. So you mentioned ServiceNow. If you think about what ServiceNow did, they took an old category and a need that customers had and modernized with a new solution. So my thesis was that as DevOps and digitization happens, you would need more automation and therefore the opportunity to create a new category leader. I ran into Tricentis. It was a small company in Austria focused on the local market. And I talked to the founders and I conveyed to them that, the opportunity is huge. It's way beyond Europe. It's really an opportunity to be a global leader. If that's what you want to do,
what kind of customers did they have then? I mean, they were obviously, it wasn't just done in the laboratory. They had customers. Who were the small group of customers that they had at the time?
So they had a small group of customers, but they had a very impressive list of customers. So they had Allianz as a customer, the largest insurance company. They had UBS as a customer, largest Swiss bank. They had A1, the largest telco in Eastern Europe, as a customer. So they had an incredible list of customers, they were just a small company focused on the regional market. So to your question of working with them, I actually told them that I'm going to join only if you two, there were two founders at the time, if you two commit to stay with me for this journey. And they were committed to doing that. And both of them stayed with us. Franz, who was the other founder, left only a couple of years ago. And Wolfgang is still involved with the company. He's still the soul of the company. Just last week, he launched a masterclass on testing. He is incredible. And so when we were looking at a transition, Kevin and I talked about it. We obviously had a lot of interest from a lot of people, but Kevin's background that he talked about, where he's worked across multiple business models and really scaled companies, is what attracted us. And we consider ourselves really lucky to have someone like Kevin join us. I'm continuing on the board and I'm available to Kevin. We are helping with the transition, helping with customers and partners. So it's been a great partnership, you know. It's the right way to do it.
Well, you look at the ServiceNow model, which you cited. I mean, Fred Luddy, could be the Wolfgang Plotz of the organization, but then he's had an incredible string of successful CEOs who are the right CEOs at the right time. You had Frank Slootman, of course, is now the CEO of Snowflake. Frank took them public as he did Snowflake. Then you had John Donahoe, who's had a pretty good career after ServiceNow. He's the CEO of Nike. And you have the irrepressible Bill McDermott, who was persuaded to leave his CEO job at a much larger company, SAP, for a faster growth opportunity. And they all seem to have been the right CEO at the right time. After scaling up Tricentis from an Austrian company with a handful of blue chip clients to what it is today, what persuaded you, Sandeep, that you had done enough and now it was time to hand off the baton?
Yeah, it was a personal decision. There were some personal things last year that made me rethink what I want to do. I felt like I'd spent 8 years at the company with great success. So there were some personal reasons, but professionally, I mentioned to you, Rich, ServiceNow is a company that I've been tracking since they were doing 30 million in revenue. Because again, I was very I at HP, we had acquired the predecessor to ServiceNow, which is a company called Peregrine, and Lundy was the CTO there. So I was tracking that company, and I saw how they brought in the right executives and the right management team at the right times to scale the company. And Kevin's too modest, but there's only a handful of executives that have done this and, are in the Frank Slootman category of people that can come into a company and really drive that kind of growth. And frankly, that's what got me excited. When I met with Kevin, it was a no-brainer. So,
what, Kevin, from your perspective, what did Sandeep tell you that persuaded you to seize this opportunity?
So Sandeep, you probably know, is a wonderful sales guy. And so he has a tremendous amount of passion for Tricentis and a tremendous belief in the opportunity. And that's really what got me really convinced in the size of the opportunity. As you know, a lot of CEOs, when they're on the way out, their level of energy, their passion for the business has dropped. And Sandeep's hasn't. He's been very involved, very enthusiastic, believes in the size of the opportunity, which really caused me to step back and say, okay, I need to go spend some real time researching the opportunity, understanding the technology, understanding, to Sandeep's point, is there an opportunity to create a platform like ServiceNow did? I mean, ServiceNow moved into ITSM, which was so boring, but they turned it into really a workflow management company across all disciplines. And if you think about the position we have in testing, and you think about all of the applications that need to be tested, built by all types of companies, and you think about the visibility developers need really end to end from when they start writing code till the point in time a product goes into production. If we can create that end to end visibility across one product platform, that's going to be pretty powerful. And that's what Sandeep got me excited about.
What I want to hear from both of you, what is the secret then when you have a handoff from a CEO who's really run a powerful leg in relay terms and then hands it off to the next one? And because I think human nature and ego often gets in the way of what should make sense. It should make sense that that happens because you capture all the learning that has been developed over the previous years and all the vision and all the future vision. But why is it so rare that what you've done happens, and how do you make it happen the way you've done it?
Now, I'll start and then Sandeep can add in. I think the biggest challenge is very few of us, and I'll put myself in that category because I've been a CEO now for a number of years. Very few of us realize when either personally, professionally, it's time for us to hand that baton off. And so that's the first challenge. But then those that do, and Sandeep both personally and professionally decided in order to get the company to achieve the vision he had for it, it was time for him to play a little different role and be a board member and advisor versus running the company every day. That's really the first challenge. And then if you can keep that relationship and that involvement, which rarely happens, of that prior CEO as they transition to the new CEO, it really matters because context is the biggest challenge when you walk into a new job is why has the company done what it's done? And really what I wanted to understand and what Sandeep's teaching me is what is unique about Tricentis? What has caused Tricentis to have the ability to be so successful in its space? Because understanding what's unique will allow me to build on that versus trying to build something that is the antithesis of what the company is today.
And Sandeep, from your perspective, what are the things you work at to make sure that this relationship, which is firing on all cylinders today, continues to fire on all cylinders, such that if you do have a disagreement about a direction that the company should go in, that it doesn't fester?
Yeah, so to Kevin's point earlier, a lot of CEOs, to your general question, a lot of CEOs don't, maybe not self-aware on when is the right time. And once you reach that decision from it, I think managing the transition vis-a-vis the employees is also very important. So Kevin and I, because the employees have been used to, many of them have been with the company for 8 years. I've hired them. They have personal relationships. So it's emotionally quite traumatic. I think keeping the focus on what is right for the company helps employees, and hearing it from me that this, I believe, is the right thing for the company, I think helps the employees make that transition. That's one. Number two, if I had announced it and there was a void, then employees get quite lost and get stressed about it because there's no leader, which is why even though we had reached this conclusion, I had reached this conclusion in December, we didn't announce it till we had Kevin identified. When they see a new leader of Kevin's caliber, then your concept of the transition makes sense because it's immediately easy to understand how and why Kevin will be a great leader in this case to take the company to the next step. And lastly, to your point of disagreements and stuff, I think sometimes people step off CEO's role but still want to be a shadow CEO, and that is disastrous. So here, very early in the conversation, I made it very clear to Kevin, I'm going to be a board member. I'm happy to share all my opinions and context, as he put it, but I'm not going to assume that everything we did was right or is right going forward. And it really needs to be him that takes that context, but then drives the decisions to go forward. And it's my responsibility not to interfere in that. Otherwise, he can't be an effective CEO. So it's really that understanding the roles, responsibilities, and who's going to drive those decisions. He's the CEO. He needs to drive the decision. Everyone on the board can have opinions. You can have 5 opinions, but ultimately it's the CEO that needs to drive the decision because at the end of the day, the CEO is accountable.
Let's, Kevin, talk about culture, because there are certain things about a culture that are fundamental, that are set very early in the formation of a company. And as Peter Thiel has said, they're very hard to change when you get to even a small level of growth. But even if they can't fundamentally change, they have to evolve over time. I mean, what kind of culture did you perceive that you inherited when you took the CEO job at Tricentis. How do you keep what is core and valuable at the same time evolving so that the company can fulfill its growth goals?
Yeah, the culture of Tricentis is based on a lot of conversations I had with a very broad group of executive team members, and then now over the last couple of weeks going down below the executive team and getting to know the employees. I think it's a culture that's aggressive. It's a culture that is willing to take risk, which I think is really important. It's a culture that's very comfortable working in a very distributed manner, which in today's world I think is an advantage. Not every company is great at that. It's a culture that wants to be the best in its space. And by the way, not every company has that culture either. I think for me, what I've found, and I've done this a couple of times now, is really understanding, as I mentioned before, what's that core thing? What's that one thing the company thinks it's better at than anyone else in the world? What makes it the best? And then understanding how that concept has found its way into all the employees' thinking about how they feel about the company. And once you understand that, then you can say, okay, here's where our culture is today. And today we're 1,000 people and a couple hundred million in ARR, and $1 billion in ARR and 5,000 or 6,000 people. How do we build that, take that core that the company was initially built on and make a foundation big enough from that we can put something really big on top of it and that the employees can believe in. So I'm still working through the process of making sure I really understand what is it the employees believe in, because that's what really matters. First we believe, then we do. If we don't believe, we can't do. And I'm a big proponent of understanding what it is that we can believe together.
Well, going back to this accelerating rate of technology, let's talk about the market size of the areas that you pursue. And I'll cite something that Satya Nadella said in his September earnings call, where he described the global IT market as 5% of the global GDP. And I think he meant everything: semiconductor companies, consulting companies, software companies, web companies, and so on. And he thought that the percentage would double by 2030. But if the economy gets back to its rate of growth prior to COVID, and it's going to do more than that in 2021 as it rebounds, then we're not talking about an $80 trillion global economy. We're talking about probably a $120 trillion economy. So IT goes from a $5 trillion a year business to at least a $12 trillion a year business, 4 trillion to 12 trillion over that time. How do you look at the size of your market and the opportunities to scale and become, a multi-billion-dollar company? I'll start with you, Kevin.
So I think that the way I try to define markets is really understanding who the users are, potential users are of the technology that we provide, and also trying to make sure we understand where our technology can go over time. So today, lots of people have different beliefs on what the size of our market is, but it's a very, very large market. It's a multi-billion-dollar market that we participate in right now today. And as Sandeep said, there's a $30 billion spent annually today on broadly defined quality assurance and testing. We don't play in all of that space yet, but our view is not just to play in that entire space, but we believe we can create something that no one's really thought about in terms of that end-to-end visibility we can provide development teams from when they start a project to when a project goes into production and is in production. So the great thing for us as a business is, if Satya Nadella is right, and he probably is, he's a very bright guy who's got his pulse on what's happening in technology. If he's right, then our market actually should grow even faster than the overall market, because we're expanding even inside the market size we have today. And I'll let Sandeep add some additional comments to that.
Yeah, so Rich, like Kevin said, today the current spend is about between $30 and $40 billion in testing. Now that's with current spend as if nothing changes. What's happening to the point that you were making and what Satya was talking about, the digitization, we are seeing that happening in real time, and I'll give you some examples. Every enterprise is becoming a digital enterprise. In Q1, and when you think about that, that expands the market even further. If the IT spend is going to go from 4 to 12, the software component of that is going to go from, 50% or 60% to a higher percentage. So when you think of software, it's even higher. every enterprise, even companies that you would not think of as technology-centric companies, are now looking at technology. And I'll give you an example. In Q1 of this year, our largest single deal was a railroad company in the southeast. Railroad company. Think about as far away as you can get from kind of a digital company. This is a company that still has a lot of steel, more steel than any other company, but they were our largest single customer that we acquired in Q1. And that's just one example. I can give you example after example. So when people talk about this digitization of the economy, it is real. And when you digitize, it's all about software. If you do software, you have to do testing. So we are extremely bullish on not just the TAM we have today, but what happens and how critical this becomes going forward, or continues to be going forward. And remember, the prior leader from a decade ago was Mercury Interactive. They were $1 billion company a decade ago when they were public. In 2007, HP bought them. They were a $1 billion company at the time. So we think there is no ceiling here for us in terms of scope. So.
Well, I see Minnie, and I see that the clock is nearly at the bottom of the hour. But since you mentioned, I have one more question for Kevin, and it's the question that all CEOs hate to be asked, but they secretly like to be asked. I mean, you've worked at SAS Institute, which is a private company, the kingdom of Jim Goodnight. You're in a market where the public funds are showering money on enterprise software companies. What do you perceive you'll be a year from now? Do you think you'll be a public company, or do you think you'll remain private?
You know, that is the question we never like to be asked. But what I told the employees when I came in is what I do is I come in and build great companies. I don't come in to build a great exit. So what we're going to focus on at Tricentis is building a great company that has a great market opportunity, that is the leader in its market, because I believe we can, if we're not already, we absolutely can be. And then when the time comes, if the public markets are the right place for us to be, then we'll be ready to be there. If staying private's the right answer for the business in order for us to achieve its vision and its goals, then that's what we'll do. So right now, I'm really focused on putting a foundation in place that it will carry us to 500 million or $1 billion, because our foundation has carried us to 200. But as you know, if you don't change and grow that foundation, you can't get from 200 to $1 billion. So I'm going to focus on that. We'll see if we end up in the public markets. But right now, we're focused on making sure we build a great company.
Well, Kevin and Sandeep, thank you for an illuminating half hour. And back to you, Minnie.
Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you so much. That was, I had a lot to take from this session, and it was truly, and it's honestly very rare to see a former and a current CEO along with the founder of Tricentis working together to make this company a very successful company. There is so much to take away. And I love the passion and the enthusiasm that I saw between Sandeep, you and Kevin. And I think our audience truly got most out of it. However, I do want to call out one more thing, which Sandeep and Kevin pointed out. And we do want to give a shout out to Kevin, Sandeep, and folks at Tricentis for your fundraising effort to support NGOs in India, to support the situation. So really, thank you, and hope you have a wonderful day.